He's out there skipping like a scratched up record, hoping that his hardcore loyalists don't connect the dots between him and Project 2025.
Good morning, Trumptopia.
Election year edition.
A special segment of the almost daily ZenCast. Hosted by the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Let's talk Trump.
Howdy, folks. I picked the wrong time to sneak in a little hot toke there. Woo. Welcome to the show. There's been a lot going on since the peak Trumptopia on display of the RNC. Like, the RNC was just this peacock show of self-delusional self-aggrandizement. And I'm not sure what I'm expecting and or hoping for out of the DNC. And quick reference to a prominent pin on the corkboard. For those of you who are not aware, welcome to any and all new listeners. I am neither rooting for one team or the other. I am indeed very eagle-eyed focused on my public discourse criticism of one particular team. And I do indeed stand in opposition to that team in coalition with anyone and everyone else on that team, which makes, of course, for strange intellectual bedfellows on certain level, but other pins on the corkboard, there are reasons. But let's not get too wound up down that series of rabbit holes. I've explained my general worldview and personal position on many occasions, and may, of course, be called upon to do so yet again in the not-too-distant future. Welcome to the show. I am your humble host, real human being, cosplaying as fictional living cybernetic life form from another dimension, as character from a book series you have not read yet, because I've only just started writing it, called collectively The Zeppoverse. Sample chapters available for mature audiences and readers interested and willing and participating in collaborative development audience feedback exercises over at Wattpad. You can find all that by visiting solo.to/Mr. Zeppo. Okay, so as an observer of the human species and of the collective curiosities of the many customs, particularly those of the nation state in which I find myself residentially stuck in. In other words, I'm here, and I don't have any viable options elsewhere at the moment, unless some sort of angel investor is involved. Pin on the corkboard. We've discussed angel, and I'll have to discuss again angel investors and my many, many, many different proposals to those of you out there who consider yourself such at another time. Okay, friends. In my time here, walking amongst you self-declared American human beings, I've noticed an array of things, not the least of which is that a great many of you don't actually participate in this dog and pony show, which arguably has many flaws and many virtues or strengths, depending on which perspective and which fundamental ideological lens through which you're observing it. But the most alarming trend I've noticed It is that of the Trumptopian worldview. To have coined a name for it from the get-go, I'd like to have a word with whoever it is amongst the, like, tween-year-olds, whatever we're calling that generation, that decides to benight. What's the word I'm looking for? When you is that benight? When you bestow a knighthood. Words into popular slang, but maybe it's the ciders over in whatever realm of influencer spheres. But of all the terms I've heard used, to go on a little tiny micro rant, I am quite self-awaredly biased, but very strongly inclined to suggest to everyone that Trumptopia and Trumptopian as neutral, like just not meaning no disrespect, actual label identifiers is the correct conjugation of the extrapolation of an idea that a man such as Donald J. Trump, for which I have no innate animosity or synonyms thereof, no emotional, I've got no feelings towards the guy. I have an intellectual assessment based on my previous awareness of his entire life when he was, formerly a Democrat for God knows how long. He was a Democrat. To paraphrase the meme, which has already had its flash in the pan moment. He was a Democrat, really hard for so long. And then, one day up, and I don't remember the wording of the meme, but boom, he was suddenly a Republican. Pretty convenient. Someone should look into that. I was pointing that out, by the way, from the beginning. This podcast was originally, if my own very shoddy record keeping is correct, which involves a little bit of retroactive recalculation because there was a cancellation of accounts involved at some point. But in the middle of January of 2017, and it could have been earlier, because I was experimentally exploring this idea in YouTube short format, but overwhelmed by the lack of easy and convenient video editing tools. And this was, of course, way before TikTok. TikTok may have existed, but I may have been just cluelessly unaware of it. I don't know. I have no idea when TikTok launched. I should look that up. But for those of you who may be curious, in terms of my internet public discourse bona fides, is that how you pronounce that? It's one of those words I've seen written more than I've ever heard, so I'm not entirely sure whose pronunciation it should be the one to go with. Bona fides. But I've literally been trolled and trolling, engaging in public discourse, questioning everything. And that's a huge, big, fat red pin on the corkboard. If we haven't had that discussion or heard me talk about it, please go diving around for it and or stay tuned because we're coming back. Questioning everything and hearing everyone out as open-mindedly as humanly possible. Being a person pretending to not be to be a non-human thing, trying to be a human thing. Because that's always been my framework, okay, in terms of a creative position. I've always felt very displaced here, very out of my element, very foreign. And not just here, but also in my place of origin. So there was this duality of like not feeling at home in my country of birth and not feeling at home in my country of permanent legal alien residence. Thus, the conjuration of my imaginary backstory for the character. Okay, I'm sorry to go sidetracking. The most alarming trend is this development and micro hyper-normalization, because it hasn't gone, there is a vast majority of people who are like, what is going on over there? And are not on board. And part of the problem is that to varying degrees, I think the central mass of the bell curve of followers, if we could line up all Trump acolytes in a bell curve of meh to like super devoted blind faith. It doesn't matter what happens. I'll die on this bell curve, to meh in the other direction for the opposite reasons as meh on the other side. They may or may not be seeing this trend, but he's running out of steam, and his own supposed... Remember when they were claiming that he was playing three-dimensional chess and everybody else thought he was playing checkers, and that's why they were confused? I'm sorry. I laughed openly at that. I just don't know that politically, maybe at like some rudimentary level, like about marketing, maybe. But even that, I think he's run his entire gambit, not to reference the character from the MCU. Don't sue me, MCU. But he's run his entire not retinue, although that almost works. Repertoire. I think he's tapped out. His last several speeches, not the least of which was his really big, he had full control of every moment of it. He could do whatever he wanted. Whatever you call that presentation that he did out of Mar-a-Lago. And then the next thing, he's just been this sort of tirade of broken record and really, really weak-ass attempts at reimagining his standard fare of third grade level playground name-calling and bully tactics. Like, he's tired. And curiously, this was especially notable at the RNC. Like, people were falling asleep. Not just during some of the more, lost in the weeds, no one knew what they were talking about, weird speeches, and it's the perfect word to discombobulate them with, by the way. That whole discussion's already been had. I'm really late to that party, but weird is perfect because there are plenty of weird people that are genuinely, authentically good and are comfortable being called weird because they know their weirdness is benign and does not cause harm. But then there are the weird people that are not good, and those people inherently, intuitively know that their weird is weird because it generally tends to lean in a toxic direction. That's why that works. That's why that's valid. That's why that's better than any of the other name calling. Because, have you looked up the origin of the word weird? It's kind of cool when you get called weird and you're down with it because you know you're not causing any harm. Right? Like, it doesn't hurt. And I know this firsthand because people have tried to use that to break me. And I've known that in moments where I knew that, like, whatever other flaws or mistakes I may or may not have made in the past or may or may not make in the future, in that moment, I was, like, minding my own business, and, like, just being me and not knowingly trying to cause anyone any harm. And they were outraged because I was full of my own joy of being expressive, I guess, of self, Anyways, I digress. The weirdness is only escalated. And there's a sort of interesting bifurcation. And this is the part that's scary, or not scary, because I'm not living in fear of it. I am deeply alarmed. But I do hope that similarly, the people in that, on either side, you know how bell curves work, right? If you don't, pause this episode and go give yourself a little YouTube tutorial somewhere, some sort of interwebs or Wikipedia update on how bell curves work. They're not that complicated, right? It's a graph. It's a linear curved graph where the center is sort of the medium strength, like where everyone's clumping if they're agreeing. And then the outside is where the drop-off falls in either direction of opposition or difference or disagreement from whatever the central agreement pillar is, that is the middle axis of the center of the bell curve. There. Now you don't even need to go to the tutorial. I gave you a little ad hoc Mr. Zeppo tutorial. Okay, so you can divide bell curves into chunks where, like, these participants tend to deviate the least from some metric, right? And whatever the arbitrary metric is, you can always divide a bell curve into thirds or down the middle in half, and then each half into thirds or something like that. If you can get a certain percentage of the people outside of the medium pillar of that bell curve, and everyone in the bell curve is like, we're still on Team Trump, but we're on either side. And I hate that it's left and right, because it doesn't have to be a left and right disagreement. It can just be in whatever access of like, he's not, he's gone too far, and or I don't know, he's too old. I don't know. You can pick. I guess those aren't fair. I don't know what that access would be, but like either way, it's a dropping off of support. Like, I'm more and more inclined to deviate from the blind faith pillar and be like, no thanks anymore, and eventually migrate towards the bell curve of supporting a different candidate. Those people are falling off. And there are those that are choosing to quadruple down. And that divide is not being acknowledged that I'm aware of anywhere. Like, it doesn't benefit the Republican Party politically. It doesn't benefit the ideological influencers and that pyramid scheme that is the mindset. Another, the Trumptopian ideological faith system, to not use the C word, because that's button pushy. Let's not push buttons. Let's label things in as neutral way as possible. Trump and those around him that have managed to influence the mythos of what Trump stands for, and not everyone has been a hand-picked, hand-approved Trump appointee necessarily. They've crafted a narrative. They've crafted an ideological lens. Now, it is deeply flawed, because inherently it has inherited the flaws of Trump and the flaws of the ideological constructs that Trump was hijacking, i.e. the collection of ideological constructs being utilized by the Republican Party. Now, there's inherent schisms there, right? And we can trace those back to the confusions and self-contradictions inherent in some of the most flawed iterations of Christian ideology, because that's deeply at play here. Despite himself mysteriously not really being a very active Christian, there is no record, there's no body of evidence that Trump is a truly religious man, a genuine person of faith, the way there are with others who spend their lives. Now, this means almost nothing when it comes to character, I assure you, as there are leaders in many a church that turn out to be bad apples. That's a whole zone of collected pins on the corkboard of discussion, friends. We have discussed it before. I'm sure we'll have to come back and discuss it again. If you've got thoughts, by the way, anytime I ever point to a pin on the corkboard to address it, note it, or indicate that it is part of a collection of things that have been previously noted, it is an invitation for you, dear friend, to consider your own thoughts on that subject, that bullet point, that idea, that thing that we're noting, and then take note of that, bring that to my attention by coming around to the Sprecher presentation of this podcast of many podcasts, and dropping your comments under the appropriate episode and indicating, what part of the conversation it's about. And also to go seeking them out in other episodes of my many podcasts, as well as more Easter eggy, hidden and sublimated in some of my other content project creation projects, especially moving forward, as that's sort of an idea that's been slowly germinating and is only just now beginning to really branch out as a little sapling. So join me on that journey, friends. We're going to take a little mental pause and celebrate our free speech ability to share and discuss all these ideas, and then try to add our chorus of voices to the public discourse out there by engaging in engagement. Tell your friends about this podcast and about the many other projects affiliated with it. And here's a little track from DJ Z, a popular one, a hot track, flaming single, Simplicity of Funk. Be sure to stay tuned for an upcoming audio playlist drop over on SoundCloud. We're going to be doing our end of summer playlist reveal. So if you've never visited DJ Z and Mr. Zeppo over on SoundCloud, please click on through to solo.to/Mr. Zeppo and find the SoundCloud link and head on over there. Smash that follow button, bookmark it, and stay tuned. It's a mystery reveal. I'm not entirely sure when I'm going to do it, but it's probably going to be at the end of the month or the beginning of next month. September is technically still part of summer. And I talked to the end of the track. Okay. All right, friends. So here we are. So Project 2025... which the Trumpster and many a talking, thought leader, to apply a generous label, in the Trumptopian ideological movement, they're playing this impossible deniability song and dance of like, oh, no, Trump has nothing to do with that. He doesn't know. He'll evaluate it if he gets into office. Mind you, he's already played the I'm totally going to win. I should really learn how to do a good Trump impression. That's a pin on the corkboard. But I digress. I'm terrible at it, and despite having been listening to him as a politician since the day he announced, with all earnestness, because I was trying to give him an honest chance, mind you. I get accused of mindlessly hating him just because the media told me to. Untrue. I was like, okay, that's wild and wacky. He's a loose cannon. Let's see what he brings to the table. And it's been nothing but farcical absurdity after what the effery. So you can't blame me that I chose to go, nope, can't do that. Ain't gonna bend the knee, not gonna kiss the ring, not gonna call that man king. And oh my God, how much do I love it when I say, blah, he wants to be a king. And it's like, no, he doesn't. And then the same person will come around and call him a king under slightly different contexts. Good grief, my friends. What the effery. Okay, 2025. Have you read it? Trust me, it's a daunting thing. And I will not make false claims. I have not completed the 900 plus page journey. It is worth doing more than just getting a good couple of different recaps from different sources. As much as it sucks, because, it only boosts the numbers. But this is something, especially if you are as some people I know in real life find themselves being in real life. If you're in a position of where, like, if you're an HR manager, if you're in any way related to or affiliated with a union, or, you know, work in a place that would like to start a union but haven't quite yet, but have been encouraged by the fact that places like Starbucks have finally relented, although did they put up a fight, etc. If you're concerned about health care for your elderly family members, like, forget about the really weird things that the GOP has a long track record of waving crazy red flags about. Forget about the wackadoodle, obviously, you know, borderline nonsensical, weird things that Trump is waving red flags about to outrage people. The truly, like, show-stopping stuff is buried in crazy places. You know, like, if you're open-minded about educational, you know, opportunities for people, but also don't hate public education, like, sure, let people have options, but don't, you know, like, don't poop on public school teachers, empower them. You might want to check into the part of, you know, Project 2025 and what that specifically addresses what they like to do with the entirety of the education department. It's this. What's the line? Oh man, here I am, a benighted dudist, and I don't have the catchphrase like memorized cold. This aggression will not stand, dude. Or man, I think he says man. And I think it is aggression. Pin on the corkboard about the dudism. If you don't know what that is, there is a real religion, like there is a real Jedi religion, there's a real religion based on the Big Lebowski, sort of. On the character of the dude, not on the arc of the movie. Although those are intrinsically interconnected. Okay, I digress. Friends, it is truly important. And as many of my real life acquaintances have indicated, like, despite the obnoxiousness and the fact that just knowing it's real and knowing that trusted sources, if you trust them, if they've recapped it for you, that's kind of an alarming enough breakdown. If you are someone that other people look to as a trusted source, if you're, like I was saying, an HR manager involved in your PTA, I can think of a million different things earlier when I wasn't ready to record, but now I can't think of any. If you are a large enough influencer and in the coalition to stop Trump and to call out everything that's going on with the GOP, mind you, many of us in that coalition also stand firm with the idea that once we've achieved that goal, because I don't need this to be a little tiny speed bump that people fly right over, okay? It's not an insignificant hill. This is of significance, and it's another thing. Like we were talking about things that no one's talking about over in terms of the schism going on in the right. It's not. There's a little bit of discussion about it because the numbers are changing, but it's been under discussed and under acknowledged, especially on behalf of the party itself over there, for a long time. I mean, since he got into office, he's been, through his own words and actions, making people second guess why they voted for him the first time. There are many, many people out there who voted for him last time and didn't vote for him the second time, and that's why he lost. And there are many, many more people who voted for him the first time and the second time and then went, oh, God, that was horrible. Why did I do that? Now, why? I can't do it a third time. So, and I don't know to what extent that is a reality, that Team Trumptopia and whatever many different levels or onion rings that you can, think of it ontologically, like who is Team Trumptopia besides Trump, his actual lawyers, his immediate, 3 rings of appointed, hand-selected sycophants, etc. But I mean also the many layers of people who are just attached to the movement and who have invested their personal identity in being an identity wrapped up in the movement. And that's where the real problem is. Most of the people, and the same thing is happening, to not get lost in my own thing. Forgive me, this is why I need a co-host. So it can be more of a conversation that follows more of a conversational path instead of my own one-sided, spiraling, multi-branched, I can't even track it myself, inner monologue. So whilst that's happening over there, under the broad tent of Trumptopianness, Trumptopia, which includes the Republican Party at its core, everyone that Trump brought in, and then the people who defected from the Republican Party over to the Trumptopian Party and vice versa, and everyone who's like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm stepping away from all of this because this is not what I signed up for. They're all peeling away. And that divide, the line that has been drawn, is one that they, as a community, have not really looked at. A few of them get it. It's clear. Some of them are speaking out about it. So seek them out and hear them out and add to their part of the public discourse. Please and thank you. And share them out. I see them, I encounter these videos across the multi-spanosphere. What would you call it? The ecosphere of many platforms. But again, to backtrack to the point I diverged from, something quite similar is happening under the broad tent that is the coalition of everyone uniting to stop the Trumptopian political hijacking of the Republican Party. Because that's one very specific, very high priority goal, which has consumed, sublimated many different ideological camps, including, but not limited to, the Democratic Party, that which will be hosting the DNC, that political body, and it's got its own, if I may, I'm not technically wearing them. Let me put them on real quick. If I may push my nerd glasses up, that has its own collection of problematic issues and red flags that was creating its own internal turmoil. And now that it has been sublimated by the larger goal of putting a stop in a decisive close the book on that chapter of history, end all possible, what do they call them in Loki, in the Loki show, when the variant timelines, are they just called variant timelines? The branches that the department, whatever that was called, that alphabet soup department, was pruning before everything happened and everything changed. Right? Like, to call up a pin on the corkboard, I discussed this in real time. We've now, we managed to close a chapter in history, and as rough and tumble as it was the first in living memory, truly non-peaceful transition of power that the American public has ever witnessed, literally. despite how much they're trying to retcon the witnessed facts of what happened that day. And thank goodness that they all recorded themselves and posted it. As Trump and the Trumptopian movement try to rewrite history, we've got this verified, authenticated, and now beautifully archived direct footage generated by the people perpetrated the days of, events. Keep my language as neutral as possible. So whatever retconning they're trying to do, whatever whitewashing they're trying to do, it is debunked by showing them that. So if you're struggling with that, friends, go pull. I don't have the link at hand, but if you look for archive of cell phone footage uploaded on January 6th, you should be able to find it. I don't have the actual preferred link, the one I verified and checked that is this is legit. I don't know if there's any weird copycat clone accounts now trying to pretend to be that, but always double check. But I digress. Here's what's going on here in the big blue tent from my perspective that similarly is under-recognized. And I'll wrap this episode up so it doesn't sprawl out into a 2-hour marathon. There are many schisms within the DNC as it is, as it has been operated throughout my observed living history with it, pretty much since somewhere in the middle of the Reagan era, that I started thinking about and questioning, why is a former tobacco cowboy, actor, salesperson the president of the self-declared most powerful country in the world? Why? How did that happen? So setting those aside, because I'm not even talking about those, right? And that includes the entire issue of Reaganomics, although he wasn't a Democrat, but hello, 40 years later, that's enough complaining, Team Blue. Where's the viable solution? But I digress. Pins on the corkboard. I sometimes, occasionally, get completely delusional accusations that I'm never, ever, ever critical of the left. No, I have a cornucopia of complex and nuanced critical issues that must be addressed about the left. But we have been in a red alert existential crisis pretty much since the day Donald Trump announced in front of a hired audience of people who didn't realize what was going on and why they had to wear wear the t-shirts and wave the signs around, because they were paid extras. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them, according to things. I wasn't there, but that's a seemingly fact-checked, verified assertion about that date. Because this guy is that, out there. And, if we're going to take ourselves seriously enough to have a real discussion about suitability for office, that's been my WTF in the world are any of you thinking question since that moment on. And it's only gotten worse. Not just for the obvious reasons, but I digress. The bigger schism, the bigger chasm, the bigger divide, the bigger issue that everyone, and some people are trying to put down stakes saying, no, I won't compromise on this. And I'm I don't know if I can agree with that particular moment now if the probability waveform functions that are truly out there is in the range of unlikely but not impossible, which include and I don't want to fall victim to any thing that can be technically written off as fear-mongering. But this guy, he's not a self-made man, because that myth of that, like, that's been debunked thoroughly. The facts of his biography are clear. He didn't make himself. He was molded out of pure, what's the word? Insert word here that many people who support him would be considered triggery. Like wealth, birthright, entitlement, and hubris, and ego. The existential crisis that we face is that this guy is truly flip-flopping magician of where, like, there is no North Star with him. Okay? That's always been evident. There is no at least in the previous several decades, the tug of war between the red team and the blue team could, at a certain level, be taken seriously enough to be like, okay, we can keep this tug of war going if we address these problems in the infrastructure, like the corruption and the profiteering on violence, etc., etc. Right? Because we need something. And while I understand the argument for a dismantling of systems, let's take a really, really big zoom back and acknowledge that that's all the human species has done for millennia upon millennia upon millennia. The issue is deeper than any given system. Any given system can look really good on paper and then go to a horrible, corrupt, spiraling mess, dumpster fire of a disaster. Because of what is it, friends? That's a pin on the corkboard. The ancient, and if you don't know this, imagine that you're part of a group and everyone else is singing along because they've all heard this refrain. Ancient, neglected, spiritual trauma that needs healing because it directly causes the corruption we see in our civilized society through individual expression of corrupt individuals. Whoa, crazy, right? Now, the same thing is going on. It doesn't matter which tent you're on. It doesn't matter which team you're on, right? I have been rudely accused of supposedly claiming that both teams are exactly the same. No. They're very different. And if someone were to force me at existential threat to only subscribe to one or the other team, clearly I can make a choice and be like, okay, team, this is the team, and we also have to be way better and make sure we don't stoop to the same horrific things the other team stoops to doing. Right, team? That's why I chose you. But given that that's not reality, we can step back and go, okay, red team needs to get stopped. And then we can, having put that fire out, we can assess the structural integrity of the infrastructure that we save from getting razed to the ground. And I've always loved how that sounds like it's an oxymoron, but it isn't. Because it is not. People who think it's an oxymoron think it is raised, as in, I raised my chalice up in toast, right? But no, it's spelled differently. That's why everyone should own a dictionary. But I digress. And here's why I think that's a valid tactic, friends. And there are many people arguing otherwise. And they're over there, very capable of participating in this coalition to stop the Trumptopian ideological trolling of America. But they don't wanna because. And I can respect that they're drawing their political lines and making a demand for their participation. And I get it, especially if they are like eligible, right? There's the big elephant in the room that has always been since I first tried to educate myself about this system of governance is that the vast majority of eligible voters never even register. Pin on the corkboard. Friends, there's a lot going on, and we can get distracted pulling on the wrong rope. Maybe that's a bad analogy because there's only one rope in tug of war. We get distracted pulling on a frayed piece of the rope and essentially working against our better interests. I see those who want to oppose Trump, but also cannot agree with specific issues that are problematic for them with the current Team Blue candidates. And I kind of don't disagree. Pins on the corkboard. I've already done a recent episode about the complexities of that issue, and I realize that I owe my hardcore audience a more specific and less open-ended version of that stance that I'm making. Again, as with politics, let me give you a broad stroke explanation of my positioning. I'm on neither team. As with politics, in regards to any and all current, recent, past, ongoing, or future military, war, situations, events, etc. For they are often labeled curiously by those engaging in them for reasons. Pins on the corkboard, if you remember things I had to say about back in the day when a certain someone was quite humorously over-denying his intention to completely invade and take over a certain chunk of a certain other place that did not belong to that country that he was a tyrannical leader of. But I digress. I'm diametrically opposed to both teams in that sport because it is ultimately an ineffective method by which to solve any of the other urgent existential problems that I am aware of and have observed the human species create for themselves. And to the best of my understanding, and I grant any and all cynics and or trolls, I am the first to admit that I could be wrong. But I am also the first to point out I've invested nearly 4 decades of long-term, fact-based, secular, unbiased, nonpartisan questioning of everything, including things that I've come to agree with on a regular basis. And here we are, friends. These are the things that I've come to conclusions that I think are urgent enough to make a complete fool of myself on a podcast about, in hopes that the world will catch on. And I'm humbly inviting you to help me make it go trending. DJ Zed, play us a little bit of music to end this lovely episode. Dear listeners, if you're new here and you're wondering why I'm vocally on the opposition coalition, making a stand through public discourse to attempt to stop Donald Trump as a politician and to stop the growth and spread of Trumptopian ideology. Please join me in a journey backwards through time by focusing your investigation of my podcast of many podcasts on the Good Morning Trumptopia playlist. I invite you to do a deep dive, do a handful of episodes of those, and then to put those into context. I invite you then to switch over to the almost daily ZenCast for a broader perspective. And for those of you old-timers, you listeners that have been here before and are returning to the show because you've got some new alerts, welcome back and thank you. And I humbly invite you to help me attract new listeners. If you jive with the kind of groovy ideas that I'm dropping here on this audio blog talk show style podcast, please do share it at other scatterbrained, open-minded individuals that may be intrigued and or outraged by what I've got to say. Feel free to send the Good Morning Trumptopia link of any particular Good Morning Trumptopia episode you think hits particularly effectively to any of your Trumptopian family members. It's quite all right. Everything I've said on every episode was chosen improvisationally, real, raw, and radically unscripted, spoken from the heart, with that kind of flash-in-the-pan audience in mind. But also, for those who are, on the verge of going, you know what, I am ready to step away from this Trumptopian ideological movement that I do not like the evolutionary direction of. If you know anybody like that, I humbly invite you to alert them to the existence of this podcast. Until next time, go be good human beings out there in the real world and on the social medias. But stand your ground and let everyone know that this Trumptopian outrage will not stand and we will not abide.
And that is the latest madness from behind the orange wall. Thank you for listening to GMT, a special segment of the Almost Daily ZenCast. Stay woke, Trumptopia. Stay woke.
Come on by to solo.to/Mr. Zeppo, a safe page for a collection of links. If you like the way it's laid out, check out their free account. Their pro account is also super groovy and lets you tweak stuff. That's a genuine, authentic, real personal endorsement. They are not paying me to say that. I'm inviting you to go there because then you can share the links to my content creation project of many projects to your friends who you think might appreciate it.